You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. Whether it's for food, fuel, drinks, or snacks, about half of the U.S. population shops at a convenience store every day. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Welcome to Convenience Matters, everybody. My name is John Eichberger. I'm with the Fuels Institute and NACS, and I am joined today by my co-host,
Jeff Lenard, also with NACS.
And Jeff, today's a great program. We sell a lot of gasoline in the convenience industry, a lot of diesel fuel, and the number one method of moving product from its point of production, the refinery, to our stores is through the pipeline. And so I'm thrilled to have Dan Gordon from Colonial Pipeline on the program today. He's part of the Fuels Institute Board of Advisors, and we're going to chat about how the pipelines work, how they make sure the product gets to where it needs to be, when it needs to be there, so that we can rely upon dependable transportation energy at a reasonable price and always be able to get the product we need when we need it. So Dan, thank you very much for joining us on Convenience Matters today.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to be here and speak with you all.
And, I think it's great that, we have you on this program to talk about pipelines because you've got a retail background as well. So you understand kind of the whole pipeline distribution, retail, the whole 9 yards. Give us a quick summary of your background.
I do. I was fortunate to start my career at a company called RaceTrac Petroleum. I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with RaceTrac, based in Atlanta, has a very large retail presence throughout the Southeast. Started there actually out of school, and I started in their finance group, but after about 5 years moved over to their supply group. And, from there, really obviously got a chance to understand the logistics and the distribution of what it takes, right, to buy a fuel from either the Gulf Coast, the refiner, or even at the terminal level, and get it to the stores. And so that's where my career. I spent 10 years ultimately with RaceTrac, but that's where my career started in terms of the fuel industry. And then from there, the next big move, I was with Delek. Delek is a merchant refiner that also owned retail as well as terminal assets. And so I got an opportunity to kind of have some perspective on the refining industry and then the terminal piece as well. And after Delek, maybe about a year and a half ago or so, I joined Colonial Pipeline. And so, it's been an opportunity for me to kind of see the energy industry from the refining through midstream through retail and get a feel for how all those pieces are interconnected and obviously all play a critical role in, at the end of the day, delivering fuel to the consumer.
And Jeff, it's funny because I worked in Capitol Hill, lobbied Congress quite a while. And there are some people in this country who still think that gas station owners are brilliant. They were able to put their stores right above where the gasoline was. They have no idea how it gets there. It's just amazing that the lack of awareness of how we get the products we have to rely on every day actually become available for us. So it's a great conversation to have.
Yeah, and the opposite of that, I was at a TV station. They were putting makeup on me, and they spent a lot of time on it.
That's always important. That's always very important for Jeff.
And they needed to. But so one of these guys, and he wasn't dumb. He just, I think has a typical thought that. So the question was, if there's a hurricane, why are all these refineries where the hurricanes hit? Why don't they just move them where the hurricanes aren't? And yes, that's a bigger discussion for another time, but. It's the same kind of thing. We locate gas stations where the gas is because it's a little more complicated than that. And that's what we're going to talk about. But I interrupted you, John. You were going with a question about talking about the extent of the pipeline, I believe.
No, I was actually just making a comment that, we published a paper a couple years ago on the distribution of fuel and trying to help people understand that when you have a disruption in part of the system, you have a hurricane hit the Gulf Coast, you have an ice storm hit the Gulf Coast, ironically, that has effect nationwide. It's not just isolated at one area because the system is so interconnected. And one of the challenges that I think, companies like Colonial have is, you guys have to be up and running. You have to continue moving, and you have to continue being able to service your customers regardless of what's going on around you. And I know over the last 10 years, 15 years, the pipeline industry has done a tremendous job of improving its resiliency and its reliability. What are some of the things that companies like Colonial have done to really make sure that we can count on the system to deliver the product when we need it?
That's a great question. And when you take a step back and you look at the modes of transportation, maybe let's just start there. And you compare and contrast pipelines. Pipelines are exceptionally efficient, exceptionally safe, and to your point, resilient. And look at some other modes, whether maybe rail, great mechanism for transporting products, but obviously being above ground and is subject to the weather, and in particular gets a tremendous amount of delays from time to time in the winter up in the north part of the region and part of the world. So, and rail is used to transport some different products in the energy industry. Another example might be barges or vessels, which again, above ground and succumb to often delays because maybe it's foggy. You see that quite a bit in the Gulf Coast, or levels of water in various rivers. And so then you look at pipelines, which traditionally are below ground, and they tend to run consistently. Now, having said that, a lot of work, effort, and resources are put into making that happen. At Colonial alone, we spend approximately $200 million a year just in maintenance to ensure that our pipeline is operating safely, to ensure that we're operating efficiently and continuing to deliver. And as technology continues to enhance, all pipeliners and other industries obviously are investing in that technology so that we can manage the system more effectively, and to your point, distribute fuel to our customers. At Colonial, we serve call it roughly just under, 50% or so of the fuel delivered to the East Coast. And that's fuel that goes to not just, everyday households, but goes to the airports, right? Goes to various government facilities, goes to the retail convenience store chain, obviously. And so, whether it's in just sort of day-to-day use or even in times of crisis, where emergency responders count on fuel to meet the needs of the community in terms of whatever is going on, it is critical that we are flowing and we're providing that resource to our customers and have it available when they need it. So, having said that, we obviously rely on the sources of that fuel to be available, right? So we need the refineries at the origins and the terminals at the origins to be up and operational to obviously provide us the product. So at Colonial, just to provide some context for the viewers, we are that distribution point between origin, where the fuel is made, largely in Texas and Louisiana, and our pipeline goes from that origin all the way up to New York Harbor. And along the way, we're dropping off fuel at a variety of destinations, right? So as you make your way up the coast, we've got various terminals that we deliver to, and then we've got what we call stub lines. So, lines off the main line, if you will, arteries that deliver to destinations. For example, we go down, go up to Nashville and Knoxville. And deliver fuel. So we're delivering all along the way, and then ultimately ending up in the New York Harbor area, where we have connectivity to most of the terminal network up there. And in order for all that to work, right, we need a constant flow of product to be pumped into the origins, because we need product to push product, is essentially the way that works.
Yeah, and my job is more around communication. So in some cases, trying to simplify things or overgeneralize very complex things. So the normal person that's not steeped in this technology can understand it. But roughly 100 million gallons a day go through the Colonial. If it were all gas, that's roughly the equivalent of about 10 million fill-ups, and the country does between 30 and 40. So that gives you a sense of the volume that goes through there. But it's not just gas; it's a lot of different products, several dozen, and with my limited knowledge of the pipeline, it's just astonishing how you have all these different fuel blends in there that move, and you know exactly when it's all going through this pipeline. Somebody at a stub or a terminal knows exactly when to pull the right product to get that there. When all along the East Coast, there's different fuel blends required. There might be diesel, there might be aviation fuel, there might be different, there might be crude oil. All these things going through there.
No, that's absolutely right. I think you've highlighted something which is, it's a very complex system, and in fact, it's more than one pipeline. So the reality is, our what we call main line, so that line that runs from the Gulf Coast all the way up to New York Harbor, is actually comprised of 4 lines. We've got lines 1 and 2 that are dedicated to one to, we'll call it clean products, or that gasoline sort of type product, and the other being more diesel oriented. And then lines 3 and 4 are smaller lines that go up into the harbor. And to your point, we've got all these different blends that we've got to manage, and along the way, we've got to sample, test, ensure that the product we get put in and it meets the right quality spec, and then the product that we give our customer at the end is the appropriate quality spec. So it is a very complex system to manage throughout the network.
And one other thing, tagging on to that, in talking about packing it, so all these different products are next to each other, and they have to move. There can't be any air in the system, obviously, but it has to be tight enough and go slow enough so that there's not an overwhelming amount of mixture. And the way I describe it to reporters, like when a reporter says, well, there's a refinery outage or something like that, how long will it take to get fuel from Houston to New York? I said, well, walk it. And it's like, what? And it's like, well, it's roughly walking pace. So that's how fast a lot of time this fuel moves through the pipeline, so it doesn't become overly mixed. And if you want to know how long it's going to take to get fuel in New York, walk to Houston. And it's like, oh, that's going to take a while. It just adds context, because I think when these systems run without interruptions, it feels like magic. And I think people they expect the normal times to be magic when they're not normal.
And I think the other thing is, I mean, Dan, you described the complexity, and it is such a complex process, but it works so efficiently. And right now, and we're in 2021, there's a lot of political chatter about pipelines. There's concerns about safety. There's the electric vehicle advocates who don't want to see improvements in the efficiency of delivery of liquid fuel products because they're hydrocarbon, they're bad for the environment, under their arguments. But quite frankly, I mean, the consumers care about price. They care about being able to acquire affordable energy. And, of the 260 million light-duty vehicles we have on the road, 259 million plus run on liquid fuel. So when we start thinking about the importance of pipelines to our economy and our way of life, you can't understate the importance. But we have to focus on safety. We were talking before we came on that I've got a photo of my daughter when she was 3 years old hanging off of a Colonial sign because the pipeline was going right past the place where we lived. Absolutely safe, no concerns. How do you guys, what is your focus on safety, and how do you guys ensure that the pipelines you're operating are as safe as can possibly be?
Sure, great question. At Colonial, we actually, in 2019, which is the most recent year awarded, won the API Safety Award. So we're really proud of our accomplishment there and our history of safety. It's not the first time we've ever won the award. But, to answer your question, one, safety is part of our core values, right? And it's something that we live, that we train on, that we focus on. It's built into our culture. And, so it's something that, regardless of the group, whether it's at the corporate office or in the field, safety is a part of the discussion in terms of, let's say from a commercial point of view, great, how do we bring this project to light, and what are the considerations to ensure that we do so in a safe and effective way? But we've got obviously a number of different teams and processes in place in order to manage the safe operation day in and day out. And just depending on what's going on, there are all these protocols to ensure that we operate safely. And pipelines, as a general rule, are among the safest means of transporting liquid fuels, hands down. But just give you a sense of a few examples. All right, so from a right-of-way perspective, right, we make obviously our pipelines need right-of-way in order to lay the pipeline through, and which was done over the course of about 60 years ago. But all of those right-of-ways have planes that fly over them, right? At least once a week. And on top of that, we have right-of-way teams that walk the right-of-way periodically. And then we obviously put out a lot of information to the various groups that live near the right-of-way. See something, say something. So it's this effort that is, call it multifaceted, with respect to just ensuring we don't have encroachment or an issue on our right-of-way in order to keep the pipeline safe. So there's not in any area of operation, right? Whether it's looking at the fuel moving, looking at the right of way, looking at delivery, or looking at origin, there's multiple processes, multiple steps that you're taking as an organization to ensure that product is safely being delivered. So it's a pretty big effort, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, Jeff and I have worked together for 20 years. He knows there's certain things that trigger my angst pretty quickly. One of them is those who constantly complain or accuse entities of not doing the right thing or claiming that pipelines are not safe. We can't have pipelines. You guys take safety as it's basically job one. I mean, you take it very seriously. It's not something new for you. It's not surprising that you guys do this. For these entities that are saying we don't need pipelines, they'd be surprised to hear that focus. But at the same time, if they were to shut down the pipelines, they're the first ones are going to complain about prices. And it's this, they take for granted what we have for our transportation energy needs, and then they just spout off the mouth and attack the very foundations of the infrastructure that makes their way of life possible. And they don't even appreciate the amount of attention companies like Colonial pay to making sure that the work you're doing is of the highest quality, the safest. Nobody wants to hurt a community. Nobody wants to have any environmental damage. Yet these antis think you guys, all you want to do is you want to go around and you're walking along, you're poking holes in the pipeline, which is absolutely ridiculous. So I'm sorry, I going off on a soapbox. I'm allowed to do that, but it infuriates me that the lack of awareness and the blatant disregard for the care that companies like Colonial put into what you do. And it just drives me nuts. And Jeff can probably say, "Okay, John, now shut up. You've said it enough. You're done."
I think your daughter picked up on your passion for the industry, because she doesn't want to go to Build-A-Bear. She doesn't want to go to Chuck E. Cheese. She wants to go check out the Colonial Pipeline or go to a bulk terminal. She can we watch the gas station until the truck comes in and fill up the USTs? Are they double walled? Those are the kind of things that she's looking at.
Unfortunately, as an industry, we probably have done a poor job collectively of just explaining what role energy plays and how efficient and effective we have become. When you think about a barrel of oil, let's say coming out of the ground in the middle of Texas or North Dakota or Oklahoma, you name it, 10,000 feet underground, pumped up, then delivered to a terminal, which is then further delivered to a refinery, processed, turned into product, then delivered through pipeline to some other terminal, to then be put on a truck, to then go to a convenience store and then finally make its way, as let's say gasoline into your tank for, obviously the price fluctuates, but $2.50 a gallon, whatever that number might be. And then, you think about that journey and then compare that to a price that we're willing to pay for a bottle of water at the same convenience store. It's stunning. And I'm not saying water didn't have a process, but it certainly wasn't as robust as what it took to get that gallon of gasoline. So it's an opportunity, I think, for the industry, particularly in the time of this we'll call it energy transition or discussion about energy, to talk about how efficient we are. That doesn't mean we can't get better. We should always be aiming to do better. But what we provide to the American people in terms of a product at a very low cost, and what it does for us, not just quote unquote the driving fuel, but fossil fuels in general, right? We need that energy and all those byproducts that they produce, chemicals, plastics, etc., that we rely on for our day-to-day lives. And unfortunately, I don't think most people appreciate just how much.
Yeah. And tying together what you were saying with what John was saying about safety, that there may be there's a lack of understanding of how things work, plus high focus on safety. And when there's a natural disaster of some sort, we had the ice storms in Texas, and the line you saw in the news was there's a refinery down. And when it's phrased like that, or let's just say there's something in a pipeline's down, or whatever it is, it's said to be down. And I think we all understand what that means, but I think the general public, when they hear that phrase, thinks something's wrong. But what it is a very complex, thought out procedure to protect things so that whatever is occurring doesn't get amplified by any safety concerns related to any of the infrastructure. Are you able to talk about that at all, Dan, in terms of how that checklist works, or the shutoffs or things like that, the protective things that happen in extraordinary circumstances?
Yeah, sure. So I think, you hit the nail on the head in terms of the industry is proactive, right? So when we see events occurring, hurricanes are a great example. Obviously, you get a pretty good fair warning. They can move in terms of where they land. But the industry, whether it's a refinery or even a pipeline, is going to look at that and say, okay, if that's coming, how do we proactively protect the assets, but also protect the people? Number one, and the community that we operate in, and obviously the nature itself, right? And so, let's say as an example, what we might do. Each hurricane you kind of look at and assess individually, but we might say, okay, this hurricane is going to come into this particular area. Are we set up with our powered backup generation, which we have a lot of across our system, but are we ready to go there? Great. Do we have the people in place to respond to an event? Should an event occur? Are they in a safe place so that when the storm passes or what have you, right, we can get to where we need to go to address an event? Obviously, all the technological components. We're testing to make sure we've got connectivity. So that's an ongoing thing. But you double check, say, hey, do we got all the readings from all the different components we have in the field? And then we might go so far as to say, depending on our line relative to where the storm's coming, perhaps we want to shut down a segment of that line, and we want to shut it down proactively, and then we want to manage and gauge the pressure. Right, so we watch the pressure in that line, and if we see a deviation, perhaps that there was an event. And if you don't see a deviation, it gives you more comfort that there wasn't an event. But before you open that line back up, you go through a series of tests and protocols to make sure that everything's okay. And so, a lot of planning goes into every hurricane that comes. Essentially, we stand up an emergency response team for every hurricane that comes. And so, and refineries are going to be the same way. They're looking proactively to say, how do we ensure that those assets remain stable and remain safe. And then they want to get them operational as soon as it's practical and safe to do so.
Yeah, and that's a complicated checklist too. And in the classic example, just even thinking about the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, supposedly it was because Beyonce blew out the sound system, but they had a power outage in the Superdome. And it took a good 20 minutes to get power back on. It wasn't because somebody couldn't find the power and just flip it back on. It's a complicated checklist that you have to go in order. And when you're talking about things that are as massive as the petroleum infrastructure, it's a very complicated checklist, and you want to make sure it's all correct.
Yeah, it's not done by the hip, I can tell you that.
Jeff, I think that power outage in the Super Bowl was just the anti-49ers groups. And I'm a Niners fan, have been for my whole life. And I just think there's a lot of haters out there hating. And I think that's what caused the delay at the Super Bowl, disrupted our chance of winning it completely. But, Dan, going back, you said the industry has done a poor job of communicating what we do. And, I'm on the board of a group called Consumer Energy Alliance. And there's a campaign we have called Pipelines for America, all about educating consumers about what's going on. And, listeners, if you want to look at it, it's consumerenergyalliance.org. Check out Pipelines for America. And Dan, if people want to know more about what Colonial is doing, the operation, what's a website they can go to find out a little bit more about the Colonial system?
Well, obviously, Colonial has its own website, and we have a tremendous amount of information on the Colonial website. So I would certainly start there. I don't know that we have information posted elsewhere. There are a lot of industry groups, such as the one that you've mentioned, that have information. But yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but I do feel like there is, everybody gets caught up in their day-to-day lives. And to your point, earlier, right, we flip a switch and we expect the electricity to come on. And only when it doesn't do we stop to ask a question. And so I think we've been such a reliable industry for so long that we haven't taken the time to educate or fully educate the average consumer about what's going on and how it works. So it's an opportunity. I don't know what the answer is, and it's probably somewhere where we need to focus some energy and effort in the coming years.
Yeah, well, hopefully this podcast is a first step in the right direction to try to raise the discussion to a broader audience. So, Dan, I want to thank you for joining us on Convenience Matters. Jeff, any final comments from you?
Nope. Amen to what you just said. And thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.